Okay, Shane, we're back. It's
We're back.
May 24th, 10 a.m. We're recording our Future Proof podcast. And our other co-host, Francesca's so busy she couldn't make it with us today, so we're going to miss her. And it's a really weird day today. It's like I'm in a rainstorm in a May, and it's like I'm up in Pasadena. Where do we find you, Shane?
I'm in Venice and it's not raining here, but it looks like it might soon. It's a little overcast, but it's
Yeah.
overcast here a lot. So
It's
this
weird.
is a
It
normal day.
Yeah, it's weird in LA. It feels like these June glooms are like really have intensified because I haven't seen the sun for a couple days. But
Yeah,
you know,
it hasn't felt much like summer recently.
yeah, or spring.
Yeah.
But that said, we're happy to be back with our podcast. Like since our last one, the world is sort of the AI race is completely sort of like is in high gear. In fact, so much was been released. We've been like, catching up ourselves. Obviously we've been trying to use the latest AI tech that has been released versus the stuff that has been announced. So I think in today's podcast, we're just going to kind of like just talk about what we've seen that has been released that we could play with, stuff that's been announced, and just sort of draw some conclusions and some sort of directions. So this is going to be like a just sort of a meandering podcast, but I think it's going to be good to listen. So for any listener, this is a good time to like maybe pop in the podcast in the car and just like listen to us talk about all this cool stuff. Um, I think the first area that we want to talk about is probably the stuff that Google sort of released. They had their big I/O event, I think on the 13th, right? So this is a full 10 days after, and Google, big picture here, and Shane, jump in. Like Google, Microsoft, two of the biggest companies in the world. Apple isn't really telling us what they're doing with AI, but like Google and Microsoft, probably the two biggest companies in the world that affects pretty much everyone's life in computing. That AI race is like on, like hardcore. And so on the 13th, Google had their I/O event, and it was all about AI. And then I know yesterday, which you might be able to touch on, is Microsoft had their event, and Satya, basically it was all AI all the time. And what the takeaway that I had with Satya's AI is kind of different than Google's in a way, because they're leveraging OpenAI a lot, and then they have all their own. They have their Phi model that they're releasing, and they're infusing in everything that they're making. And I believe that like Windows as an operating system is fundamentally going to become an AI operating system, meaning that as a technologist, we could write code to leverage all of those hooks that they're going to let us have into their AI models or other AI models, but it will fundamentally be augmenting the way the operating system will be. And I think for Google, you're kind of seeing that, but they don't really have an operating system outside of Android, and they're really not talking about that much. But their operating system, in a way, is like augmenting the way we search.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said a lot there. I'm gonna just let you jump in or interrupt there. Is there anything you want me to punch in on there, or anything you want to respond on, like how we're seeing Microsoft and Google, because these are our two big players right now.
Yeah.
OpenAI is, I don't even want to put them in that same layer, because like Microsoft and Google are such massive companies, but OpenAI is like punching above their weight, like majorly
Big
compared to
time.
these companies. What do you think, Shane?
I mean, I think OpenAI has really changed the conversation. That's really been a catalyst for players like Microsoft, like Google, who are just so much bigger. Um, so they OpenAI just has a lot of influence right now, and I think it is why Microsoft has cozied up to them so much. Obviously, Microsoft has made a massive investment into OpenAI, but I think it's really put Google on its back foot. And we've talked about Google quite a bit, in previous podcasts, and the sentiment seems to change a lot. It's like, Google's really in a bad place. That's, maybe the end is even near for them. And that opinion changes quite a bit, even internally with us, where it's like, actually, if one player is really positioned well, to take advantage of the new capabilities that AI offers and really be useful for people, it would be Google, I think, for many reasons. So I think even our opinions change on, Google in particular. I actually have paid much more attention to what has been happening with Microsoft over the last, week or so. And one of the things that I think is, and if you listen to, their leadership talk, they're just very, very, very thoughtful about how they're approaching, this entire movement. And very specifically, one of the things that stood out to me is just the notion of bringing the model directly to your device, right?
Yeah.
The language model directly to your device, to your device, that is. Um, People know about large language models, right? I mean, that has started to enter the public consciousness. The idea of these very, very big language models, they require a ton of compute power, they require a ton of data. But one of the innovations that is making this new breed of devices, which Microsoft has just announced, even possible, is a small language model, right? So, in other words, they're taking, an actual AI model and putting it directly on the device. And that is extremely powerful when you think about the fact that you don't want all the everything you're doing and how you're interacting with the model to go to some server, in the cloud, right? It's all happening locally on your device, which has a lot of really big implications. One of which, privacy, I hope, right? It's not all your stuff's not going directly to them. I mean, I think they obviously still could get access if they want. Um, but mainly it's being able to have, wherever you go, access to an extremely powerful piece of technology that can, not just answer questions and chat with you, but is literally recording everything you do on your computer. It's taking screenshots constantly of what you're doing on your computer, and it is multimodal, right? So, if you are playing a game, if you are doing any type of work in a browser, in a document, and you need help, you can speak with natural language, ask for guidance. I think this is just a really, really powerful idea, and not a lot of people have gotten these, computers in their hands, these devices in their hands
Yeah.
yet. But
Yeah.
just the ability to have the model running locally on your machine and being able to interact with it like you would with a human, right? With vision, with your voice, is just like, it will totally change how I think we will start to do things in the future and have all sorts of downstream consequences. I think
Yeah.
Google is not, that's just a different, Google's not there yet in
Well, I
my
mean,
opinion.
I think that they are like, I think that they have released, I think they're, so yeah, I agree. And I think like, you know, Google and Microsoft have been sort of fundamentally different companies from the get
Yeah.
go, right? Because Google started up as a web company, and Microsoft, when Google started as a web company, Microsoft wasn't even sure the web was going to be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it was like they're just DNA is baked different, and so you have, Microsoft today. They really do just their DNA is so different in a way that like they do think about like personal computers and like
Mm-hmm.
operating systems. Like they power so many systems. So and they're more like Apple in that respect. So Apple has sort of the neural engine on their silicon chip to kind of do like to do a parallel processing in their way. And then Microsoft is sort of thinking like, we have our Surface tablet, we have operating systems that go on all these computers that Michael Dell and everyone else makes. So they're coming up with their inference compute chip designs on the devices, right? So what that means to like the average listener here is that like the thing that makes when you ask an AI something, you don't really want to wait. Like you just want the answer right away. And that becomes more apparent when you're actually talking to an AI. And so where we are today right now is you're typing into an AI and then it's generating a response back to you as text on a screen. But that's going to change really quickly because you're just going to want to talk to an AI. You're going to say like, write me a review of an employee named Shane. And it's going to actually just do that. You're not going to have to type that in. It's just going to respond back to you in text or in voice. So in order to actually reduce the latency of that, you want to get that that software on the device you're working on and the compute, meaning the what it has to do, local, so you're not wasting any time to get back to you. And so when you start looking at where Microsoft is at and where Google's at, and no doubt Apple with Siri, they're all going to try to move the computing to the edge, and that might be your phone or your iPad or your desktop. The server will still probably be very much involved in that at some level, but you want to actually be able to do the compute. I run Llama and Phi locally on my Mac, and it's great. Like I get it. And so I think over time, as we grow up in this new generative AI space, we're going to see as technologists, we're going to see models being pushed to the end of, to the edge, meaning your device. I think for a general business person, what this means to you is that you'll probably get better performance and perhaps a cheaper product, and that you can use it. But in most cases, this is not going to affect the average business user. You're probably still going to be using a cloud-based AI system because that's where most of your apps are.
What I'm curious, what about the the Google announcements really stood out to you? Were there any in particular that you were really excited about relative to
Yeah,
others?
like so we use Google Docs and
Yeah.
we use Google Sheets and we use Google Mail, right? So we're kind of like our stack is like we primarily use Google for mail. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
and we use Slack as well. So we're kind of find ourselves with probably with another 100 million people that we use Google Gmail, right? And by definition, then we often use Google Sheets and Google Drive, etc. We also use Notion a lot. And what makes me really frustrated with Google all the time is their Drive product is terrible. It's terrible in every measure. It literally is bad. It's bad in I can't even go into it. It's just a bad product. But it comes with what we've got, and so we have to use it. And so what excites me is Google having to face the fact that they got to make their products better with AI. They're looking at how to make Google Drive better, meaning like if I type in, you know, a document name, I get it back. You know what I mean? Or you know what I mean? And right now, using Google Docs, I'm not sure if I type in like a search term that I'm going to get back the Google document that I want to find, like the most recent.
I
And
mean,
so
you and I are perpetually for years. It's like I know it's in the drive somewhere, and I have no idea where, and I
yeah,
can't
it's like they
find it.
don't sort it in a way that's logical. And I really feel this is where I think OpenAI has helped all of us. If not for OpenAI, Google will probably not be addressing their Google Drive product because they're already making the money, and like why focus on it? They probably can't get anyone on their teams to like make it a better product, and so they would just sit there and we'd all suffer. Since AI's kicked off, we now are getting, Google's now forced to sort of modernize these products. So I think I'm most excited about them updating their core products. Also, Gmail search sucks too. And by the way, Google as a search company, they've never made their Gmail search any good. And so I really feel like what's made me excited is I think it's wakened, it's forcing the product management teams at Google to probably get executive leadership to say, no, we've got to make our products better. And I think that affects every business user. And I think that's
Mhm.
that's important for all of us consumers and business users. We just want a fundamentally better product. So for the same $20 a month, we want a fundamentally better product. So that excites me. What worries me about Google's product announcements is that I think that the elephant in the room here is that it's going to decimate SEO, right? It's like, you're going to go to Google and like, it's fundamentally going to change the way search is going to be received by me as a searcher, right? So they're looking at like Perplexity and saying, that's us 20 years ago. We can't lose this business. And so they're now making it so when you actually run a search query, which you can actually try, now in some cases, it's going to like return back an answer. You know what I mean? And so the more and more Google is generating a response for you based on all the search data they've crawled, it could mean that people are above the fold in their search getting their answer, and the below the fold is all the links to all the websites in the world. So I really feel like if you're a publisher, you actually are going to probably see your SEO not perform as well over every month going forward. And that's, exciting maybe for you as a consumer, but it's very dangerous for everyone that makes their living by like promoting content inside of search engines.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge elephant in the room.
It's amplified even more when you think about the long-term implications of multimodality, right? So one of the big releases, the announcements by Google was Project Astra, which is a multimodal language model, right? And they demoed it off. It's essentially their equivalent of this new GPT-4o model that has come out, which is also multimodal. And for people who don't even know what multimodal means, we're talking about the ability to not just interact with this AI by typing questions and reading the response also back in text, but being able to, converse with natural language. And when you think about so obviously this is very helpful when you think about, wanting to, interact with your computer, your device, without having to constantly click on new windows and open up new tabs. You can just speak and then immediately get back an answer, right? That's extremely helpful.
Yep.
But when you are a business who hopes to be part of that answer, right? Like now that has narrowed the funnel down to the size of a needlepoint, right? Because it's a fundamentally different behavior where if I go to Google and I'm searching for, a local dry cleaner, I can see 50 different results within, a few seconds and choose the one that I want, or go to Yelp and, find the restaurant. If I'm just speaking to my device now saying, hey, like, I want to know, where's the best place for me to drop off this shirt to get dry cleaned? And it's like, well, you should go to, XYZ place. That's, a bunch of other companies that now never made it even into the conversation potentially. So I can see what you are talking about, where the implications from a, just a basic discoverability problem, let alone the SEO, issue, are really magnified for a lot of people. And it's even more so when it's not just a local business, right? Like if you're just looking for, a piece of digital information that's out there, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's local. All you need is to find the one, and the other 49,000, let alone, 5 in your local area are just totally irrelevant now.
Yeah. It's like, I feel like, in the 90s, we created, like, the web became popular, and so people made web pages, right? And Google figured out a way to like allow you to find web pages. And if you wanted to find something like very interesting, like how to do some esoteric computer technology solution, there would be someone that would have a web page for that, and Google would help you find that. I actually feel like we are moving past the concept of a web page. And for the average, listener, it's like what's happened is these models have like collapsed all of the world's web pages into what we call a model, which means all the data is like compressed in this like little model. And instead of Google needing to actually send you, when you type a search term in, or you say a search term in, or you show a photo to the AI and say, what is this? It doesn't need to like go and find you a web page and give you a list of links to go to. It can actually tell you exactly what it is, right? Which alleviates the concept of what the web fundamentally is, which is a disparate set of documents all spread out, interlinked using hypertext links. I feel like what's happening right now is, which is exciting and alarming. Exciting for me as looking forward, but alarming for me as looking backwards to the web, is that the web is fundamentally maybe dead or have changed so drastically that it's going to be just irrelevant. Like searching might be irrelevant because you as the consumer are like, what multimodal means. It's like I'm taking my phone out, I'm putting it in my refrigerator, and I say, read me 5 recipes I can make with what I have in my refrigerator, right? Or take a photo of your refrigerator and say, make me a video on how to make something that's in my refrigerator, right? So the multimodal could like read the photo in and then respond back to you with a step-by-step video on how you should make the food in your refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
That means everyone that has a recipe website is just gone. You're irrelevant. Like Google's consumed all your media. They know every recipe and they could deliver the video, not an influencer, not anyone. And I think that might be interesting for a consumer, but terrible for every maker in the world because you don't
Well, I
really
don't know how
fit
often
in.
you look up recipes. I love to cook, and one of my biggest pet peeves is when I find a recipe, I have to scroll through 15 pages of someone's backstory,
Right.
To get to the recipe, which GPT will just give me immediately.
Yeah. And
Right.
so I feel like the makers and the creators of the world of web pages, recipes, all these sorts of things are going to get baked into these large language models. And as a consumer, we may go like, look, we don't care. We just want the answer. But there's going to be something lost here. And that excites me and concerns me at the same time. Right. And, so for example, like in Google now, I type in a very, a technical thing, a search query. I type in like how to set up a Docker image for Unreal Engine. Well, the first thing that comes back to me is a generative AI experimental, which is actually, they give me the code to do that. Like it's not like they're giving me, 50 links. Now, if I scroll way down, there's an endless scroll of links, but let's be honest, I'm looking at the code to run that. I'm not going to some, really interesting system engineer who come up with a plan how to do this request. That guy's cut out. That really concerns me because as a maker, it's like, okay, where do I fit in a post, AI world?
Yeah.
And
I totally, I also, I mean, that gets at the whole conversation around, you know, if a lot of behaviors and therefore a lot of jobs are going to vanish, what will be the new behaviors and new jobs that now emerge? And I think the ones you're talking, like a lot of makers, there's just not going to be a demand for a lot of
well,
those products anymore. On the other hand, there are a lot of new capabilities that I think will be a major service. Even just like everyday, normal things that we do and we take for granted. Advertising. On this, like if I stay on this thread of SEO and how it's impacted, there's an adage that most of us have been aware of for years now, which is I waste 50% of my marketing budget on I just don't know which half it is, right?
right.
Like people have been saying that for years. And I think one of the reasons why normal consumers hate advertising is because they're seeing the half that gets wasted, right? It's like, I don't want to see these pop-ups, it's just not relevant to me. But I think one of the things that these models are really enabling us to do quite well are really learn people's preferences to the point where what you are getting served, right? If you're asking that question that you're talking about, what you are getting served is going to become more and more relevant to what you actually want, even if you didn't even ask for it to begin with, right? That's a good experience. Like a good advertisement is actually really great. I love seeing good advertisements because it's like, oh, actually, I didn't know I was looking for that, but what you just showed me, that pair of sneakers or this, you know, fitness product or whatever it is, like I actually really like that. I love that brand. I never heard of it before, but you've learned my preferences to such a degree that you've served it to me exactly when I want to see it now. So is
Yeah.
it good for the creators? Like for a lot of creators, no. But I think for some creators, like you will end up finding products that, you know, you never knew existed, you never would have found otherwise, you know, through a traditional search experience. And I
Yeah.
think that is really good for brands. Like if you start a new brand, it's like, I know they're, you know, maybe it's like a very niche product and you can start it thinking, I know there are, you know, 100,000 people out of the 8 billion in this world who would really love my product, but I have no idea how to reach them. If we're entering a world where now you can really efficiently pinpoint all those very specific, you know, equally niche focused consumers, that's a really good thing for you as a creator, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, just from running ad tech businesses, we've that's where the, you know, sort of like the Google supervised learning, you know, boom over the previous 10 years, we really got good at like identifying those users, and that's what Google's value prop was like we could drop a an ad an ad into the person's feed for you, and if they click on it, we charge you, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we've been there, and what you've been saying I actually agree with, right? It's like if you're into a hyper focused concept, whether it's tech or physical fitness, those ads are contextually really good, right? And there actually could be a value add to you at times. And then underneath that, it was all the web pages, right? And so it's like it's what's where my worry is for all of the makers that are making anything that were using Google, and by the way, Facebook products as well, is how do you actually show up in an AI generated return
Mm-hmm.
response that can yield you like an inbound link or something. I think that I don't think, you know, I don't think we know what that's going to be like, because again, it's like if it's generating something and the generations like what you're saying, it's like, you know, okay, hey, I saw what's in your fridge, you should make a burrito, you know, boom boom boom. There's in a response, whether the response is audio or video, it doesn't really make sense for you, like, oh, by the way, you should check out this and this. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you even click on that? How do you follow that?
Yeah. I, yeah,
It
it's
it's a
it's
big
hard to
deal.
imagine, but what it's making me think of, and this is kind of a different example, but I don't know if you've ever used the Shop app.
The what
Um,
app?
the Shop app,
In
Shop.
Google? Oh no.
I find it to be a really helpful app, and really it just, you know, first of all, most people interact with it when they go to an e-commerce store and they can
Right.
click on the shop button and then use that to for their payment experience, just the payment gateway to
Yeah,
checkout.
I know
But it
that.
also, you know, will track shipping, you know, so you can go to the shop app and you know, I can see where what all my orders were across many different websites, Amazon included, and be able to get live updates on, you know, where it is on the map as it's being shipped to me. And one of the things that I really come to enjoy about Shop is the recommendations that it makes, right? Because it knows my history. It knows my
Right.
history better than really almost any other destination would, and it serves up constantly these very obscure boutique brands based on my history, and I almost always find those recommendations really helpful,
That's great.
right? So I see like where we're going with things like multimodality as only serving to amplify that type of personalized experience, because when you start throwing in your device in the mix, right, or a pair of glasses at some point, and all I need to do now is take a picture or scan someone walking down the street, like, hey, I actually like what they're wearing, or, you know, I like that bag, or, you know, whatever it is, or a piece of, you know, it could be food, it could be art, anything. Not only are you going to be able to find that very specific item that you're taking a picture of or you're looking at, but it will start to build a history where it's
For sure.
identifying everything that you're lingering on, for a while. And I think any brand that's making, a product, regardless of whether it's food or art or anything in between, and they consider themselves in the category, this very niche category that you like, that you inhabit, like it'll be so much easier to find those different brands. So my hunch is like one of the directions that this could all go is that you see a sort of renaissance of, the boutique style brands. And when I say boutique, I don't necessarily mean in the traditional sense. I just mean like everyone's got a style. There's a different, you know, category that people want to put themselves in, that's very unique. And my sense is that as other people identify with those different styles, it'll become much easier for people across the globe to find each other, who consider themselves also in that, category because of this
Yeah.
new tech.
Yeah, I like your optimistic POV, and I know that you have some experience with that as your background as an entrepreneur, and I think you're heading. I think that's an optimistic point of view. For the listener, I think that multimodal is somewhat of a technical term, and just to demystify that for a second, it literally means that like you could present AI a video, a photo, your voice as an input. So if I took a video, if like, for example, I take a video of me writing a mathematics problem on a piece of paper and I videotape my path, I could literally give that to the AI and it could actually tell me exactly what I'm doing right or wrong. And that's going to happen more and more real time. So you can imagine yourself eventually getting to a place where the AIs can see and hear, and they can respond back to you with audio and text, and eventually images and videos. And so, where I think Shane's optimism is as your photos are getting taken, and if privacy, concerns here, but it could say, hey, it could start learning you very specifically,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of it's as a result of all the photos of what you've taken, it could start really recommending like hyper contextualized things for you to probably purchase or to match your
Exactly.
room or space. And I think that's a very optimistic thing, and I believe that might be true. The questions that I that were that come up for me is like, how as me as a merchant feed the AI engine that I actually have this product. You know what I mean? Because right
Mm-hmm.
now I've been trained for the last, as an SEO, I come from SEO experience. I got really good at training the algorithms of search to find me and index me. And the question is if we move past the web page as the unit, like how are we feeding the LLMs and which ones so that we can kind of get our data in there so that we can actually when someone's using an AI, we could be referred back so that we could get that inbound link so we can make that sale. I think
Yeah.
that is a multi-billion-dollar problem. Google makes most of their revenue, as well as Facebook, as selling ads. So I know they're incentivized to figure this out. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So
I
so
think I am optimistic. I mean, I think because ultimately, it is all just economics, right? Like, I mean, the businesses will do, I think, ultimately, maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but they will do what yields the most money. And what tends to yield the most money is people buying stuff that's actually useful.
yeah.
Um, I mean, I think the market will, I think, eventually more or less guide us to a place where it becomes more helpful over time. That question is still very much up for debate. But one question I would ask you in response is, what lessons can we draw from the music industry? And I ask that because if you go back to when we were kids, finding good music could be really tough, right? Even finding good media, right? Like, how often did you watch documentaries when you were younger? I know for
No,
me, it was almost never.
never.
And if you ask me how often did I watch foreign film, also almost never. you'd hear people talk about it, but it's like, well, I don't know, like I'm not going to go to Blockbuster and find that, right? But Netflix totally changed everything,
Right.
right?
They're a
They were able
recommender.
to say, hey,
Yeah.
we think there's an opportunity here with this very obscure niche genre set of characters appealing to a very specific type of, market, but we know we can reach them, and therefore we're going to fund this experience that 10 years ago, 20 years ago, no studio would ever put money into it, right? Because they're not going to be able to find the exact number of people they need to make it a profitable endeavor, right? Like Netflix has done that with film, and they make all kinds of really amazing content now that you'd never get to see in the past, whether it's
Yeah.
foreign film or, documentaries. Music, same thing, right? Like you can go on Spotify and just put on a playlist of an artist that you like, however small they may be, however obscure they may be, however obscure the genre may be, and end up pretty reliably finding really good stuff that you've never heard of before. And
Yeah.
most of the time it's from like really small, creators with not they don't really have big followings.
Yeah.
I feel like I can see that happening with like any other product that you care about. So I'm just curious from your perspective, like is that the right analogy to draw? Like if so, like what needs to happen for us to get the similar type of benefits, elsewhere outside of, streaming media?
Yeah. I think the recommenders that have been developed over the last, call it decade or two are really good. And they've definitely changed, consumer habits, which I think you were kind of talking about. Like, hey, like
Mm-hmm.
Netflix can recommend a documentary to you. And they can also, like, as a result of knowing that there's a consumption pattern there, they can also order those to be made.
Yeah,
Um,
because to make it a finer point, like now your consumption like before with music, with media, it's easy now, right? Because Netflix can see exactly what you click on. They can see how long, like what thumbnails resonate with you. Spotify knows what you're listening to. But with multimodality, my point is we are now entering a world where you're going to have a similar history as a playlist, right? A similar history as what you watch, because we are going to be able to see what you're staring at, right?
right.
Like
Well, and
what you're
Microsoft has a product now where it can, like, actually, like, record everything on your screen
exactly.
and play
Yeah.
it back to you, which is, and I think that that's like, frankly, I don't want that product. Those are security products, by the way, that have been around for a while, and I think, I think they're quite scary. Um,
Mm,
but let's just go there. I feel like what you're kind of saying to me, and I think what's happening is like, Google's and Microsoft's have been reliant on people that make content, that go out of their way to make blog posts, or YouTube videos. All those were all inputs into these models, right? Like it or not, that's what was happening. And we're now getting these LLMs, which are basically a compression of all that. I think what you're also now saying is like, well, if everyone's recording everything they do, the model actually is going to see everything everyone sees almost at the same time, and it can connect those dots. But more specifically, it can like connect the dot for you and perhaps give you like really great suggestions on stuff for
hmm.
you to do, see, eat, buy, etc. And I think that's
Yeah.
probably the most optimistic point of view. And I think that that's where both, Facebook and Microsoft and Google are going, and Apple
Mm,
for that response is, I think, like, the device that you have in your hand actually becomes a learning system. It already has been. It's already been watching what you've been clicking on and been building
hmm.
recommenders for you. That's, TikTok's whole business is a recommender. Like
Yeah.
there is no, like, you know, the concept of Twitter and Instagram, those are circles. Those are like friend circles. You had to actually friend people. TikTok was just like, here, we're just going to recommend you stuff. And it's actually proven to be really good.
Hmm.
I have, Netflix is a recommender system. Uh, Google is a search recommending system. We might be moving past that. And I actually think it's pretty interesting. And let's getting back to like the business model here, like just for a sec, as a business listener, if you're a business listener and you make a business, you should be following what Microsoft and Google have done to their businesses. They immediately have been, by the way, both those businesses have been fundamentally running on AI systems, but they have now re-engaged what AI means to their entire business and are changing it completely to orient themselves that way so that they could provide and stay ahead of AI. They want to be the provider of AI systems. You, as just a random business, you need to be thinking about, okay, they just did that. How are we going to do that? And what Shane has been communicating is like, the you're going to need to orient yourself and your team to use AI in ways that you're not sure how to do, and we certainly can help you think through that. But the consumer is going to be doing that, and how do you show up and where do you show up, right? It's like it's everyone's on this journey right now together because it's happening. It's not going to happen. It is happening. And what I've been sort of saying is like, if search engines are fundamentally changing how they're going to give you a result, and you rely on search engines to be found, you need to be thinking about that right now,
Mm-hmm.
because you may not be found anymore. And so these are all really pressing things. And with all the announcements that Google and Microsoft have been making, we're trying to tell you, read between the lines. Microsoft is going to be building an operating system that's powered by AI, so that you can interact with your device fundamentally a different way. And the response that you get back from Microsoft's AI systems, how are you as a business going to show up in them? If you rely on inbound traffic as a publisher, how are you going to rely on that? If you rely on SEO traffic or search engine traffic, how are you going to show up in that? These are really important points that you need to be thinking about. So if you're listening to this podcast and your mom or your dad or your uncle has a website, pass this podcast over to them, get us in touch, because I think that that's what's happening. And I think that that's what's exciting us right now with AI, with Google's announcements with their products, is that they're fundamentally changing the way that you're going to interact with their software, and as well as Microsoft. And that's also really worrying. And so you, as just a plain old consumer who's like, hey, I've been typing in search terms in the Google search engine and I get 100 links back. None of them are that good. You're going to start getting answers back. You know what I mean? And those
Mm-hmm.
answers are going to be coming as visuals. They'll become as videos in the future. They're going to come back as audio, and it's going to be a completely different experience for you. Not overnight, but just subtly, more and more and more. That's
Mm-hmm.
exciting. Um, and I think that there's, if you put on our our hat on like new jobs, I think what's going to happen is there's just going to be new companies that emerge. Like Perplexity is a new company. Most of you probably that are listening to this have never heard of it, but it's actually doing what Google wants to go do, right? And Shane, you have a lot of experience for Perplexity. Like, what do you love about it, and what is that telling us about the future of what it's going to be like using an AI to help you do work?
Well, Perplexity, for people who don't know, who haven't been exposed to it or used it before, is really just an AI enabled search engine. And I use it all the time. In fact, I do pay for a paid account. It's the same cost as most of these other AI agents. So it's $20 a month. I find it incredibly useful even on the free plan. Um, but it is essentially a chat agent that you can converse with, but it can also search the web. And one of the things that I liked about it immediately was that when I got back those responses to any of my queries, it also provided a list of sources, right? So you can fact check, and then to your point, Anthony, you can actually see the companies that are behind and informing that data, which is clearly better for them, than if you had just asked a question and then gotten back a response without having any idea where the source was or the company or author who provided it. Perplexity will do all of that. And it's really become indispensable to a lot of the research work that I do here on our team. But I would say also, just as a business person, a a lot of teams, at least the smart ones, I think, they are building their products and really trying to maximally introduce the capabilities of models like ChatGPT, into their offering. Customer service, I think, has been the lowest hanging fruit for a lot of businesses. They are using ChatGPT or some equivalent type of model to handle a lot of those inquiries. But with things like multimodality being, you know, coming to market, there are going to be a lot of other use cases which we haven't even really thought of yet that will be a result of customers interacting with different businesses, buying things just in a totally different way than they did before. And I would encourage people to think through some of those use cases right now, right? Like if I don't need a keyboard to interact with your product, like how might you do it? Think from the perspective of a user. Start allocating some time to considering what the different modes of behavior are to either find your company or to interact with it, to pay for it, whatever it is, because that is coming. And I think the people who really invest some time to thinking through that behavior shift stand to gain quite a lot.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of our AI product strategy sort of work that we do, right? It's like, for a lot of people, we find that most companies are still just, they have to kind of work their current business model, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe on the fringe, they can offer like a little bit of AI embedded in the product to the end user, or maybe they can get their team to use AI to like make them a little bit better, faster in their daily work. But we are recommending and encourage business executives to do is actually um, make budget to have like a full innovation team think about how your products and services will live in an AI world, and that doesn't necessarily come from the current team that's grinding out the day to day. It doesn't mean it excludes them. It just doesn't allow oftentimes to think about what Shane was just mentioning, which is really really important. It's like this, and those workshops are really powerful for a lot of executives that we do. It allows them to just, because innovation is going to keep you alive here, right? It's not going to be static. You can't double down. My recommendation is not double down on what's working today, because it's more than likely not going to work the same way in the future. And really, I ask business customers to say, what do you think Google's a great company? And they go, yeah. Do you think Microsoft's a great company? And they go, yeah. And they go, well, what did they just do? And they go like, I don't know. And we'll say, well, they're reinventing every product and service they have, because they're reimagining what the consumer needs and wants.
Mm-hmm.
And so innovation is going to keep you alive here. And you may actually, if you're a donut company, and you make great donuts, like that's your core product. But like Shane was saying, how do you get found? How do you get realized you're the best donut? Like if everyone's starting to use, like everyone takes, if someone takes a photo of a donut, like you want to be able to show up. Google might not be able to present you that way. So yeah, everyone
Yeah.
needs to be rethinking on how to market or build their businesses, not necessarily change what they make. They may actually make great donuts, but there may not be a way to be found soon. And I think that's really important. So as we wrap this up, because we've got a few more minutes here, Google made a bunch of announcements. The biggest one I think right now is you're going to see as a consumer is like you're going to be able to see if you're advanced. They're going to start answering your questions with AI, but they're launching. They're going to have their own image generators and their own music generators. Those are coming now. Like they're going to be available for you to try, and you could go to labs.google.com and you could see all the stuff that they're launching. They're going to be launching a video creation tool. Like, what does that mean for you if you're a video creator? I think you need to look at this. Of course, they're launching their model, which is, they call it Gemini. And if you hear ChatGPT all the time, and you're new to AI, Google has their own ChatGPT like product. They call it Gemini. That's going to be baked into everything that you're going to use with Google, and Microsoft is going to have their own. So these are all the big players over the last couple of weeks have released very interesting stuff. If you're an OpenAI fan, they've released ChatGPT 4.0, O meaning Omni. And if you're a programmer and you can use ChatGPT 4.0, it's become faster and cheaper. And if you're new to AI and you just played around with OpenAI and you've been using their free stuff, their OpenAI's new free stuff is actually better. They've actually now are giving you open a better model for free. So there's just like the speed in which the race is happening at the Google and the OpenAI and Microsoft level is moving very, very fast. There's a lot of stuff happening. Most of it you could probably just ignore in a way, because what you need to really just focus on is getting your team to adopt a AI product focused strategy and really work with them on using AI every day on all their solution, on all their work product, so that they can become better. And as a product innovation team, you really need to start thinking about your, I don't want to say it like, it's like, I don't know what to call it, but it's like an AI enabled world, you need to figure out like, how do you fit in? You know what I mean? Because Microsoft, Google, Adobe, Apple, OpenAI, Salesforce, all these companies are going to be really leveraging AI in such a substantial way that you're going to be forced to live and compete and work with teams that are using them. And where do you fit in? Why do you fit in? How do you excel? How are you going to beat your competition? These are all questions that you need to be asking yourself. And if you need help, we could help you. But really, fundamentally, I think Shane was pointing out some very optimistic ideas, and I'm agreeing with him. But I'm such a pragmatist of like, because I work inside, sort of like I've been
Yeah.
working inside a code. It's like I kind of think like, well, there's a lot of implications here that are forcing people to like really think about their job and their identity inside their company as a result of AI. Um,
Well, I think we also should all always forever have a healthy distrust of big organizations, whether they are, public or private organizations. But, I am I was staring off to the distance here because you were talking about the donut shop. Just a quick aside. It reminded me of a tool I came across recently called of.one, and it's essentially just an automated drive-through technology, where you can converse in natural language essentially with an AI to place your orders. And I bring that up because the conversation should not always just be about ChatGPT or the latest release from Google or Microsoft. There are literally tens of thousands of different, very purpose-built solutions that we've been tracking internally, and that we've organized on our own website, coai.co.
yep.
And that should be part of your journey also, right? It's not just looking at what the big guys are doing. There are a lot of really thoughtful products that have been, really purpose built for very specific use cases in very specific industries. And if you're not out there exploring what they are, I think you're doing yourself a bit of a disservice. Um, I'm also thinking about the fact that recently, I think it was the U.S. government mandated that I think all government agencies have eventually a chief AI officer, right? Which I think is a smart move. And I bring that up because just as, any entrepreneur, any startup needs to constantly be talking to users, right? You need to constantly find out, what do they care about? What are their problems? How are they interacting with my own product? And maybe most importantly, how is my own product not solving those needs, right? Like, I think a similar type of conversation needs to begin happening within every company around how they use AI very specifically, right? And that can be really difficult. It can be very intimidating for a lot of people, especially if they're not technical. But if that describes you, call us.
Yeah,
Call us. We'll help
exactly.
you. We'll help you get the conversation started, right? We talk about, the fact that like these multimodal, very, very powerful technologies are coming out. It's going to change how people interact with pretty much every business at some point. And thinking through the implications of that for your company, the behavior change that your customers are going to go through, it's not an easy exercise, right? So engage, reach out to us, talk to other folks in your network who are familiar with these different um, technologies, and just get like start a new habit, right, of contemplating these things, and I think it'll pay dividends.
Yeah, like the whole reason why we're doing this, with Shane and I set out on this journey of like kind of helping companies and individuals become sort of AI advantaged. We often use the word AI literate, but we really just feel like this is what it was like when I started seeing the internet emerge, and there were going to be these web pages. This predates even thinking about it as a web application. 100% of all the companies in the world had no web page.
Mm-hmm.
100% of all companies had no web pages. And 20 years later, there's, like, it's just a completely different world. You couldn't imagine like a world without a web page or a web app. And so the, in early on when we started to see these models emerge and how fast they were going to create a new opportunity of a whole new software paradigm for businesses, we realized that no one was really prepared at all, and nor do they have the time. And so you have like weren't prepared, didn't have the time, and then the speed in which innovation was happening was basically 100x anything we've ever seen. We absolutely felt like we needed to analyze all of the AI offerings out there, which is impossible to do, but we're doing it. And we then became a service immediately to entrepreneurs and executives to say for us to sort of sit with them and just sort of like think about their strategies. And we have a unique background as a result of me building web software since the 90s, and Shane being a business executive and well trained. To sort of think through these problems with these executives, and all of the time that we talk to teams, we're really, not shocked, but kind of shocked at how not ready people are. And
Mm-hmm.
we are telling you as a listener, whether you're a business owner, your dad or your mom, or your brother is a business owner, they're standing on slippery rocks right now, and they may not know it. And so we're not doing this because we're just going for a money grab. We actually really care about entrepreneurs and businesses, and because we know they employ people, and we're really here to make sure that more people have the opportunity to work with people that deeply think about this and help them get prepared, because we believe that not enough people are thinking about how to prepare businesses and people to work, and that's the really hard part. And so that's the hard part that we're working on. And we need more people to like kind of come join us and think about these problems, because we think people are the most important equation in all this AI stuff. It's not the
Mm-hmm.
AI. It's like how people are going to work, when and where are they going to work, and we want to make sure that like we're getting that message out, and that we're talking to more and more people, because there are a lot of really cool apps that are being developed by small teams and big teams. Forget about the Googles and the Microsofts. And we really feel like it's an opportunity to boost the ecosystem on one side, but on the other side, like you as just a business, owner, like how do I leverage this? Like, well, we got an answer for you. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And we also want to dig deeper with you and say, by the way, you should be doing this with your product. And we're actually working with a new group right now, and they're blown away. Like we're cutting friggin' hours out of their day. You know what I mean? And we're getting them prepared for the future. And for us, that's super rewarding. Like it's super rewarding to work with teams to see how they could become more efficient. Um, and to us, that's what's driving us. And so that's a little bit of a shout out about what CoAI is doing and what
I,
Shane and I
I
are
I would
doing.
say also, if you are on the other side of that equation and you are one of the builders in this industry, again, I mentioned we are literally tracking tens of thousands of new AI software tools that have come out in the last few years, and they are not ChatGPT, right? I mean, a lot of them are using ChatGPT's underlying technology or Google's underlying technology or Anthropic's underlying technology, but they're very purpose built to do what you need them to do. And we talk to countless entrepreneurs who run these companies all the time. They built incredible tech, but no one knows they exist. So if you fall into that category, you've built an amazing new tech. you're having trouble reaching your audience, I would love to hear from you also.
Yep.
Um, because what we see is really there's an enormous market. This goes right back to the conversation we were having before, where it's like, around SEO and reaching your target market. We are seeing it here in this very industry where on one side you've got all this, really thoughtful innovation happening. The Googles and the Open AIs are drowning the conversation around them out. On the other side, you've got just an enormous number of people who are eager to learn and find the tools, and they're just not really meeting in the middle. Did I lose your audio, Anthony? But the point is, regardless of which of those sides you fall on, we'd love to hear from you. You can go to coai.co, and we'll get hopefully a very thoughtful conversation started.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's more for us to cover on both OpenAI and Microsoft's and Google's product releases. We sort of drifted off, but today's podcast was about us just drifting off. And we often think that the best sort of podcasts that we love listening to are ones where we feel like we're joining a couple really smart people talking about a subject, and we're like eavesdropping. And so this podcast is really designed to feel like you're eavesdropping on a conversation, and that you're learning some stuff. So
I do want to end on another optimistic
sure.
Note or observation that I had. When I think about multimodality, one of the things that I actually see a lot of hope for is just this notion around having always on help, right? And I think, even in its previous form, ChatGPT did a lot in that category, right? Like being able to have just this tireless assistant answer any question very thoughtfully and very informatively was really helpful. But I think the ability to have that assistant be able to see the world in real time and talk with you in real time just takes it to another level. And one of the reasons I think this is so powerful is I think about when we started all shifting to remote work in the last few years, I
Yep.
thought about the toll that really took on junior hires,
Yep.
right? Especially like junior members of our engineering team. They're off. They don't have a work history. They're working at home. They're by themselves. It's just day in and day out, hours behind your screen, and you don't always have someone to go to for help. That's a really lonely and I think mentally deranging experience for a lot
Yeah.
of people.
Deeply. I mean,
And to be able to have an assistant, and if you are an introvert on top of that, and you're not comfortable proactively going out and asking questions and seeking help, that's just a recipe for disaster. And you're seeing it all over the effects of, a lot of these dynamics all over the place. The quiet quitting phenomenon, people leaving their jobs, people are just fed up, right? And I think a lot of it's because they don't get the help and the attention they need. And I'm not saying that AI should be a substitute for that human level of intervention, but I think with all this multimodal stuff,
it's a
I
proxy.
think there's the potential to really, I think, have a really meaningful intervention, like a very positive intervention in people's lives where they're able to freely ask questions whenever they want, as often as they want, and get help that's so much more engaging and interesting and way faster than having to go to a really dense like user form or web page and read a bunch of documentation.
That
No one wants to do that.
that's over. I mean,
Yeah.
Shane, I agree. Like we're wrapping up here, but I spent a lot of time pair programming. And before it was called pair programming, we worked as engineers in generally like shared offices. And I would say almost 90% of my learning was actually working with my colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
And all the software that we were using was mostly open source software. And the only way that we actually learned was like, telling each other how to get something done. And then also like actually chatting on this thing called IRC. And
Mm-hmm.
IRC was, fundamentally to me a chatbot. I know there was real humans back there, but it was like fundamentally the only way that I learned. And I feel like, the moving to the edge, like alone in your rooms, you really lose a lot of the what I just call the intangibles of like working with other humans. And I do believe I have experienced myself directly sitting there and asking ChatGPT in this case how to solve a problem, asking it for stuff was absolutely de-stressing me, because I would be like frustrated that I couldn't figure something out, and it would answer and it would be not right, but I'd just go back and forth, and it's fundamentally changed the way I code, the way I look at
Mm-hmm.
coding, and um and I think that is really optimistic and powerful, and I think we can kind of have a podcast about that. But since we're kind of coming up to a place where we got to wrap, we are doing this podcast. We're trying to release every week. We would love for you guys to give us some reviews when you get it, likes, all that kind of jazz, because podcasts are also in an algorithm. And if we're not getting like plays and reviews, we don't get put into the algorithm. So we're asking you to like, punch us up in the algorithm by giving us a review and a
Share
like
it with a
wherever you
friend
can.
you think might like it too.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, we're going to sign off. It's again, Friday. We'll be back next Friday, and we'll put a bunch of show notes and links into our show notes, and we'll get this thing out as fast as we can. So that said, I'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks for listening.
Yep, right on. Good job, Shane.
We out.